Hello and welcome live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Gautam Roy, and coming up in the next hour, Israel rules out Gaza ceasefire without release of hostages, says it has exposed Hamas's tunnel network underneath the war zone's hospitals. Anthony Albanese tells Xi Jinping in Beijing that it's important for Australia to have communication with China. The Kremlin shuts down all talk of Vladimir Putin making another run for the Russian presidency in March next year, says he's made no such announcement. And Angelo Matthews becomes the first player to be given timed out in the history of international cricket in the World Cup match against Bangladesh. First up, the Israeli military has released a video on Monday showing their troops firing at Hamas targets as airstrikes escalated in Gaza. These airstrikes have led to significant smoke plumes, with the Israeli Defense Forces reporting that fighter jets have targeted 450 locations associated with Hamas in Gaza. The Israeli army also claimed to have exposed a network of Hamas tunnels, command centers and rocket launchers beneath and adjacent to hospitals in northern Gaza. And as the conflict deepens, the European Union has said it will increase humanitarian aid to Gaza by more than $26 million, or euros for that matter. Meanwhile, the United States says it's working towards a humanitarian pause in Gaza to allow the release of people held hostage by Hamas. Here's a report.
It's day 31. The conflict between the Israeli Defense Forces and Hamas is escalating. The Israeli army has opened a humanitarian corridor in northern Gaza to allow civilians to move south. The Jordanian Air Force airdropped urgent medical aid to the Jordanian Field Hospital in Gaza. Meanwhile, the United States has stepped up its diplomacy in the Middle East as Arab countries are anxious over the situation in Gaza. They are holding hectic parleys. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is visiting the region for the second time since October 7, met with his Turkish counterpart and discussed the Gaza conflict.
We just had a very good, lengthy, productive conversation with Foreign Minister Fidan here in Turkey. We discussed the crisis in Gaza, and including the efforts to significantly expand humanitarian assistance.
Washington says it's working to ensure a humanitarian pause in Gaza, which would allow more aid to Palestinians and the release of hostages held by Hamas. Israeli forces are also on high alert on the northern front as tensions rise along the Lebanon border due to cross-border firing between militant groups and the IDF. Israel said it has uncovered a network of Hamas tunnels, command centers and rocket launchers under and around hospitals in northern Gaza.
Hamas systematically exploits hospitals as part of its war machine.
Hamas has taken more than 240 people hostage. It has been more than a month. Families are eagerly waiting for their loved ones. Israel has rejected calls for a ceasefire in Gaza until the release of all hostages held by Hamas. The West Asia is on the verge of a major humanitarian crisis. Abhishek Bose for DD India.
And the Israeli National Security Minister assessed the scene of a Jerusalem stabbing attack on Monday. The police said 2 Israeli police personnel were stabbed near the old city of Jerusalem earlier in the day. A 16-year-old Palestinian stabbed 2 officers near an old city police station. The incident unfolded amid heightened tensions linked to the ongoing 31-day Gaza conflict. U.S. intelligence agency CIA Chief William J. Burns is visiting Israel for discussions with leaders and intelligence officials. According to media reports, this visit is in line with the US trying to prod Israel to pursue a more targeted approach while attacking Hamas, allow pauses in the fighting for aid to enter Gaza, and to do more to avoid civilian casualties. Tension seems to be rising between Israel and Lebanon as well amid recent incidents of a strike on a car in southern Lebanon last Sunday that killed 3 children and their grandmother. The Israeli army's armored vehicles were seen moving along northern Israeli roads close to the border with Lebanon in an apparent sign that all is not well on the nation's frontier with that country. Let's now take you across to my colleague Amritpal Singh joining us from the war zone there in Israel. Amrit, US Secretary of State has completed his second round of visits to the region since the 7th of October. He came with the objective of ensuring pauses in the fighting to save lives and send aid and secure the release of hostages. Has he been successful?
Okay, he came with 3 purposes. You're right. 1, de-escalating the tensions here. 2nd, getting the hostages released or giving a push to that process. Aid is increased inside the Gaza Strip. I would say, on the humanitarian front, since he first came after the 7th October incident, the US has been able to convince Israel to loosen up the mechanism of monitoring and allow more aid to go in for the Gazans. So on that account, yes, he has been partly successful, Gautam, because UN keeps saying that what is going in is far less than what is required. And that's true, but it has increased significantly. Agree, Egyptians and the Americans, 20 trucks.
Well, that link with Amritpal Singh seems to be a bit tenuous. We'll try and reconnect. Let's move on for the time being. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has met with the leader of Tehran-backed Palestinian group Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran. Iranian state media reported on Sunday, a day after Hamas officials said they held a meeting in recent days. Iranian state media said Haniyeh briefed Khamenei on the latest developments in the Gaza Strip as well as the developments in the West Bank. Without elaborating when the meeting took place, Iran's Tasnim news agency said the country's top authority, Khamenei, emphasized Tehran's consistent policy of supporting the Palestinian forces against Israel. Okay, I believe we've managed to re-establish the connection with Amritpal Singh there in the war zone. Amrit, we were talking about what sort of success has Antony Blinken had in his second round of visits to the region?
So I was saying, Gautam, that before we lost the connection, that on the humanitarian aid front, he has been able to increase it from when he first came. On that, Israel has relented a bit. On the humanitarian pause or ceasefire, absolutely nothing. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu used the words to his army saying that take the word of ceasefire out of your lexicons. The Arab foreign ministers that he met in Amman yesterday, he met Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, and today he was in Ankara. They have clearly told him nothing going forward unless there is an unconditional ceasefire, which Israel is not amenable to. So for both on the ceasefire and the humanitarian pause, I think he has nothing to take back. That's a setback to American diplomacy and also to a wider peace of the region. On the release of hostages, there are negotiations going on, but that hasn't. That's just got 5 hostages released till now. But around 240 hostages are still with Hamas. So I wouldn't say he has been successful so far on that account. But yes, there is some negotiation, Qatar-mediated negotiation, which Hamas, the Israelis and the Americans and other countries, French, are part of. Gautam?
Yes, and the irony is, or there's at least something contrary there, that Israel is saying release hostages in exchange for ceasefire. Hamas is saying there's need for a ceasefire before hostages are released. They're also saying hostages are being killed in the Israeli bombings and strikes. Now, where's this conflict going in the middle of all this?
Okay, both sides are taking maximalist positions. They're saying we'll not release hostages unless you ceasefire. They're saying ceasefire is out of question. Release the hostages first. Basically, I think both sides are not ready to relent yet. The Israeli assessment would be that a weakened Hamas would be easier to negotiate with. Now they've encircled Gaza. They're getting into close combat. To weaken Hamas or cause it considerable damage, they know the limitations of aerial airstrikes. They will have to go in for close combat, which has already started and would intensify in the coming days. Past the next 48 hours would be crucial. Then is when the real, negotiations would, we could see forward movement in that, because then Hamas would be weakened. A weakened Hamas would be more amenable for Israelis. It will give them more time to get their military objective of decimating or at least causing significant damage to Hamas. Then is where you could see a forward movement. So I think right now it is heading towards an intensified military campaign, intensified military fighting. I mean, it's going to be devil's playground, because once you start fighting in the built-up areas where you have about 300,000 civilians still holed up inside that built-up area of Gaza city, you will see civilian casualties go up. You will see Israeli casualties of Israeli soldiers go up. Hamas could start killing hostages. We don't know. We don't know whether what the Hamas is claiming about hostages getting killed in Israeli airstrikes, etc., is just information warfare. Or, so the picture would be clear. As always in war, the first casualty is truth. Both sides are making claims, but they're making maximalist positions. The conflict is heading towards more intensified stage in the coming days, Gautam.
Yes, certainly it does look that way, and none of the two sides are willing to relent. Let's hope it doesn't escalate further to other regions as well, which is again still a constant fear with the kind of utterances and the meetings that Iran's leadership has been having. Thanks a lot for joining us for the time being, Amritpal Singh. Now, the conflict in the Middle East is expected to dominate the agenda when top diplomats from G7 countries meet in Tokyo on Tuesday. Foreign ministers are wrapping up a year of G7 meetings as Japan looks to successfully conclude its presidency of the group. Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
Well, when the G7 foreign ministers meet here in Tokyo next week, it is going to be the conflict in the Middle East that will be top of the agenda. That wasn't always the case. When Japan's foreign minister Yoko Kamikawa originally called this summit back in September, the goal was simply an end-of-year catch-up, a wrap of all the meetings, G7 meetings so far, a catch-up on how member countries are doing on their goals and their priorities stated in those meetings, such as countering perceived Chinese military assertiveness while maintaining independent economic and diplomatic ties with Beijing, supporting Ukraine in its conflict against Russia, cooperating on climate change and AI regulation and a myriad of other topics. But it is going to be Israel's ongoing bombardment of Gaza, democratic calls around the world for a ceasefire. These issues are going to be discussed. Japan is going to be concerned. It is going to be wary of analysts' speculations that the U.S. resources, the military resources going towards Israel at the moment and going towards Ukraine at the moment, may be depleting military resources that could be coming in this direction towards Japan, towards South Korea, and the U.S.'s ability, pledged ability to protect Japan and South Korea's interests in what it calls a free and open Indo-Pacific. Japan is going to be looking for reassurances from U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken that this part of the world remains a priority for the U.S. and certainly a meeting that South Korea is going to be watching very closely as well. Chris Gilbert in Tokyo reporting for DD India.
And still to come on DD India News are, Anthony Albanese tells Xi Jinping in Beijing that it's important for Australia to have communication with China. Former US President Donald Trump is set to testify on Monday in a New York civil case where he stands accused of fraudulently inflating his wealth. And key elections in 3 U.S. states on Tuesday are being seen as the first indicators of issues voters will focus on during the 2024 U.S. presidential contest.
How do you evaluate ISA's progress so far? Are you satisfied with it?
In terms of money, in terms of programs, in terms of memberships, all have gone up dramatically.
Has India played a satisfactory leadership role in ISA?
The Indian experience has led the ISA. Also, Indian financial resources have been at the heart of ISA moving ahead.
Who foots the bill around the world for solar energy?
Largely the private sector, but government guarantees are important for this to move into areas which are yet underserved by the private sector financing.
What is the first target that you would like to achieve?
The first target is get the regulatory structures in place so that solar becomes the energy source of choice.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy. Malaysian Foreign Affairs Minister Dr. Zamri Abdul Kadir has arrived in India for a 2-day visit. The visiting dignitary will be co-chairing the 6th India-Malaysia Joint Commission meeting with his Indian counterpart Dr. S. Jaishankar during his 2-day visit. The Joint Commission meeting will review the progress of enhanced strategic partnership with Malaysia in several areas. He will also call on the Indian Vice President. The visit will provide an opportunity to comprehensively review bilateral relations and to explore ways to further deepen and strengthen them. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is due to testify on Monday in a New York civil trial accusing the former president of fraudulently inflating his wealth. State prosecutors are seeking to bar Trump from doing business in his home state and $250 million in damages. Our U.S. correspondent Yara Spritzer reports.
New York Attorney General Letitia James has accused Donald Trump and others at the Trump Organization of inflating the value of assets by billions of dollars in order to obtain better terms on loans and insurance policies. Trump has denied those charges and called the proceedings biased, setting up a courtroom confrontation. Last week, Trump's 2 sons, Donald Jr. and Eric Trump, both testified and tried to distance themselves from the accounting aspects of the family business. That may prove more difficult for the former president since he is the owner of the Trump Organization, whose companies are involved in real estate and other ventures, and ran it until becoming president in 2016. Even before the trial, the judge ruled that fraud had been committed, so now it's essentially a matter of determining how serious the penalties should be, something that will also be decided by the judge and not a jury. Because it's a civil trial, Trump can't go to jail, but prosecutors have sought to fine him and others as much as $250 million and revoke the organization's ability to continue operating in New York, where it has properties such as the Trump Tower in Manhattan. It's one of several trials that Trump is facing as he seeks to regain the presidency in elections next year. The former president is currently the frontrunner to be the Republican Party's nominee to challenge Joe Biden. Ira Spitzer reporting in San Francisco for DD India.
And millions of Americans will head to the polls on Tuesday with key races in 3 states, Kentucky, Mississippi and Virginia. There is also a vote to enshrine abortion rights into Ohio's state constitution. The results of these races will be the first indicators of what voters are focusing on ahead of the 2024 presidential elections, which is now just about a year away. Tony Waterman has more.
As the clock ticks down to Tuesday's elections, candidates are out in full force. A last-ditch effort to wrangle new voters and rally supporters.
It's because of each and every one of you here that we are going to win on Tuesday, November 7th.
Andy Beshear is fighting to keep his job as Kentucky governor. A Democrat in a deeply red conservative state, he's employed an interesting tactic, boasting about the benefits of Bidenomics without actually mentioning the president directly.
An unpopular president drags the party down. This is what we saw with Trump in 2020. A president who's personally popular will be able to gather seats.
Right now, Joe Biden's approval rating is hovering around 40%, hardly enough to coalesce voters in red states. It's a bit hazier in purple states like Virginia, where every seat in the state legislature is up for grabs. A Republican win would empower Governor Glenn Youngkin to enact conservative policies on abortion, taxes, and education, making it one of the most closely watched races in the country.
Because Virginia is a battleground state, both parties look at Virginia as looking to see which issues are working. And if there are issues that are working in Virginia, those are going to be the issues we see in the fall 2024 election.
One big unknown is whether anti-abortion policies will galvanize voters like it did in the midterms. Ohio may provide answers.
The leading opponents of Issue 1 want an extreme ban on abortion, with no exceptions for rape, not even for children.
Voters in the swing state will decide Tuesday whether to enshrine abortion rights into the state's constitution.
If they look and say, wow, it still has traction, it's definitely going to be a big issue. For the Republicans, they're going to look at the economy.
The outcome of Tuesday's elections will provide valuable insight into what issues are and aren't top of mind for voters headed into 2024. Those elections now just a year away,
giving candidates from both parties ample time to adjust their strategies. In Austin, Texas, Tony Waterman reporting for DD India.
The first Australia-India Education and Skill Council meeting was held in the western city of Gandhinagar in Gujarat on Monday. The two sides comprehensively reviewed bilateral cooperation in education and skilling and agreed to further strengthen their knowledge and skilling partnerships for greater mobility, employability and prosperity of people in both the countries. Indian Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan expressed satisfaction as the steady progress made on mutual recognition of qualifications, establishment of joint working group, joint skill collaborations, study in India, visa-related issues for Indian students and research scholars, among others.
ऑस्ट्रेलिया और भारत की एजुकेशन और स्किल सेक्टर में संपर्क गहरा होते जा रहा है। 6 और 7 2 दिन भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया की द्विपक्षीय वार्ता भी होने वाला है। रिसर्च, स्किल डेवलपमेंट और कई सारे जो जॉइंट प्रोजेक्ट है इसके बारे में कुछ अनुभव एक्सचेंज भी होगा।
India's Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, that's MIT, has issued blocking orders against 22 illegal betting apps and websites, including Mahadev Book and Ready and Pesito Po. The action follows investigations conducted by the Enforcement Directorate against illegal betting app syndicates and subsequent raids, revealing the app's unlawful operations.
हम लोन ऐप और बेटिंग ऐप हमेशा जब भी जो भी रिपोर्ट करते हैं हम हमेशा उसको ब्लॉक करते हैं। आरबीआई के साथ हम काम करते हैं लोन ऐप्स के लिए और बेटिंग ऐप्स के लिए तो हमने एक नोटिफिकेशन भी जारी कर दिया है ऑनलाइन अप्रैल 2023 में क्या परमिसिबल है क्या परमिसिबल नहीं है इंटरनेट में और जो भी रिपोर्ट करते हैं प्लेटफॉर्म्स को प्लेटफॉर्म का दायित्व बनता है कि वो निकालें।
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has held bilateral talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday. Albanese became the first Australian leader to visit China since 2016 when he landed in Shanghai on Saturday. Albanese's government has taken credit for stabilizing ties with China since coming to office last year. And let's get you more on this with Patrick Falk reporting from Singapore.
Received at the Great Hall of the People, and President Xi is reported to have said to his Australian counterpart that the relationship had embarked on the right path of improvement, and that he was heartened to see stable relations between the two countries, and that it had come about because of the joint effort of both governments. The Australian Prime Minister has made it an absolute top priority to mend relations with Australia's largest trading partner since coming to office, and he has made some success, particularly in the lead up to this visit, with China removing most of the trade restrictions imposed on Australia in 2020 following a series of diplomatic disputes. And in recent weeks also, of course, we've seen the release of Cheng Lei, the Australian journalist who was detained for 3 years on unspecified national security charges. And by all accounts, his visit has been very much welcomed by China. Now, analysts say, though, that China won't want to dwell on what's happened over the past few years. Many observers make the point that this has ultimately backfired on Beijing because it has resulted in Canberra moving closer towards Washington, particularly militarily. What Beijing does want to do is it wants to promote this narrative that it is Australia coming back into the fold, as it were, and doing so in its national interest.
In neighboring Bangladesh, the second day of the countrywide 48-hour blockade has been underway with some incidents of violence and arson. The blockade is being enforced by the main Bangladeshi opposition party, that is the BNP, and its allies to force Sheikh Hasina's party and government to quit and hold elections under a neutral administration. The 48-hour-long blockade sparked stray incidents of violence where more than 15 buses were burned by the mob throughout the country. The blockade has affected public transport, which also created scarcity of basic essentials. 228 platoons of Border Guard Bangladesh have been deployed across the country to maintain law and order during the blockade. And let's go across to DD India's Naval Singh Parmar for more on it from Dhaka. Naval, how has the day gone so far? Has that been largely peaceful or was it as violent as it was yesterday?
Yes, compared to yesterday, today it was peaceful, and on the street of Dhaka there were many vehicles, mainly the private vehicles. However, the public transport was not much available for the commuters, but the private vehicles were there, auto rickshaws, CNGs, and the motorcycles were there on the road. Schools and colleges and other educational institutions were remained open, but due to fear and the uncertainty, most of the parents refrained from sending their children to school. So there were a sparse presence of the student in the education institution. There were a disruption of the communication line between the district place and the divisional cities like Dhaka, Chittagong. So the effect was were more seen on the district headquarters as well as the divisional cities. Otherwise, the countryside remained peaceful. And one latest development is that the BNP announced another phase of blockade today from Wednesday morning.
Right. So clearly the BNP plans to remain on the warpath. What can you tell us about the kind of issues that it's raising, and how is the Sheikh Hasina government trying to counter these issues in a build-up to the elections?
Yes, BNP and other opposition party, they are demanding for the resignation of the Sheikh Hasina-led Awami League government, and they are asking to hold an upcoming national election under the party-neutral national government. However, the Sheikh Hasina-led government is not in a mood to bow down to the demand of the opposition. And there are no sign from the opposition side also to think over a dialogue with the government and settle the issue. So BNP is regularly or time to time they are declaring new program for the blockade or hartal or the rallies, and so the tension and uncertainty is has crippled the people in the Bangladesh.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us an update on the situation there in Bangladesh. Let's now take a look at some of the other updates that have been coming in from the country. Well, the Indian state of Chhattisgarh is gearing up for voting as polling for the assembly elections starts on the 7th of November. The 90-member state assembly is scheduled to take place in 2 phases, state assembly elections rather, with voting on the 7th as well as the 17th of November. Delhi Customs seized gold bars weighing 5,198 grams, valued at an estimated 2.81 crore rupees at Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport. This was brought by 2 Indian nationals from Bangkok, and both the passengers were arrested. Indian Minister for Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution Piyush Goyal flagged off 100 mobile vans for sale of wheat flour under Bharat brand in New Delhi today. This is the latest among a series of steps taken by the government for the welfare of ordinary consumers. The crest of Indian Navy's latest indigenous under-construction guided missile destroyer, Surat, is scheduled to be unveiled today at a ceremony to be held in the Indian city of Surat. This warship is named after the commercial capital of Gujarat, a city with rich maritime and shipbuilding history. And still to come up on DD India News are: the Kremlin shuts down all talk with Vladimir Putin making another run for the Russian presidency in March next year. It says he's made no such announcement. Ukraine could get one step closer to becoming an EU member this week. And Pope Francis stops his speech midway, seeming out of breath during a meeting with European rabbis. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy, and before we go any further, take a look at some of our top stories. Israel rules out Gaza ceasefire without release of hostages, says it has exposed Hamas's tunnel network underneath the war zone's hospitals. Anthony Albanese tells Xi Jinping in Beijing that it's important for Australia to have communication with China. The Kremlin shuts down all talk of Vladimir Putin making another run for the Russian presidency in March next year, says he's made no such announcement. So Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has denied earlier reports that claimed Russian President Vladimir Putin has decided to compete in the March presidential elections. Peskov said Putin has not made any announcements that he will run for another term, and the campaign has not yet been announced. Putin has served as Russia's president for a tenure longer than any other leader. And now let's get you updates on the Russia-Ukraine war. Well, conflicting reports emerged on Monday as Russia claimed its forces attacked a Ukrainian airport, while Ukraine asserted that its armed forces had successfully repelled Russian attacks on several fronts. According to Russian Defense Ministry, their forces repelled Ukrainian offensives in multiple locations and claimed to have destroyed Ukrainian tanks, armored vehicles and self-propelled artillery. Meanwhile, Ukraine reported clashes and stated its intent to use loitering munitions for a winter attack on Russian territory. And in another incident, at least 5 people were injured in Russian missile strikes on Odessa late on Sunday. one of the city's principal art galleries, Odisha National Fine Arts Museum, was badly damaged in the attack. The museum, in one of the oldest palaces of Odisha, housed more than 10,000 pieces of art, including paintings by some of the best-known Russian and Ukrainian artists of the late 19th and earlier 20th century.
Our Pearl, our city's national art museum. Today we have seen yet again how the barbarians treat our cultural heritage. The church, the museum are within the UNESCO zone. There is nothing that can stop them.
Russian military forces carried out airstrikes on a drone warehouse in Syria's Idlib governorate, the Russian Interfax news agency reported. No information about the scale of the damage or potential casualties was available. The Syrian army accused rebels, calling them Islamist jihadists, for attacks on government-held areas in Idlib and Aleppo provinces, and denies indiscriminate shelling of civilian areas or areas under rebel control. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on the US to provide more funding to help his forces counter Russia and invited former US President Donald Trump to fly in to see the scale of the conflict for himself. In an interview airing on Sunday, Zelensky invited former US President Donald Trump, a Republican, to visit Ukraine and see the fallout of the conflict. Zelensky said he will need 24 minutes to explain to President Trump that he can't manage this war. Trump has been sharply critical of US support for Kyiv and has said he could end the war in 24 hours if re-elected. European Union executive is expected to recommend taking Ukraine one step closer to becoming a member of the bloc this week, according to EU officials. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's Brussels-based executive will publish a report on Wednesday assessing progress achieved towards membership by EU hopefuls. On a visit to Kyiv on Saturday, she praised Ukraine for making headway. The Commission said last June that Ukraine met 2 out of 7 conditions and EU had said to start membership talks. The Commission report on Wednesday will also cover other EU hopefuls, including Georgia and Moldova. Let me now take you across to Megumi Lim, joining us from Kyiv for more information on this. Now, Megumi, Ukraine is constantly trying to shore up support for itself, be it militarily or financially or politically for that matter, while it fights against Russia. But with talks of a stalemate on the ground, is it becoming an uphill task?
That's right. It has been a very difficult counteroffensive for Ukrainian forces. And as you said, Ukrainian top general Valery Zaluzhny has said recently that the war has reached a stalemate, where the war has shifted from a maneuvering war to a positional war, where both sides are not making a lot of movements. And we have indeed seen in this counteroffensive that Ukrainian forces have not made any significant gains on the battlefield. But President Zelensky has refuted these claims, this assessment, saying that last year, where experts and some observers, people have said that the counteroffensive last year has reached a stalemate. He said that there were a few military tricks that were implemented and the region of Kharkiv was liberated in the fall of last year. So we are also seeing a little bit of divisions among the military top brass, and with President Zelensky refuting claims from the top general himself has been an interesting development. But of course, the biggest concern is whether or not there will be ongoing support from the United States. We have not seen the U.S. Congress passing any additional funding for Ukraine as of recent weeks, and the Biden administration has been working hard to try to shore up more support as well to get new funding for Ukraine, and he has tried to join together funding for both Israel and Ukraine. But the new House Speaker Mike Johnson Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson has rejected this proposal and has passed actually a standalone bill for Israel through the House of Representatives. But President Biden has said that he will veto this bill if it gets to the Senate. So we are seeing a lot of divisions politically in the United States. And so this has been a big concern because, of course, Ukraine is heavily reliant on U.S. support as this war continues on.
Definitely. Now, the Kremlin has also said that President Putin has made no announcement about running for the post again in March. Now, why did it need to issue such a statement?
Well, so this statement was in response to a report by Reuters citing some sources saying that the President Putin, has decided to indeed run for the presidential election next year. But as the Kremlin has said, Putin has not officially decided, and there's not been an official statement confirming that President Putin will run. But we are expecting to see an announcement soon because President Putin was the one who did start the war in Ukraine, and this has been one of the biggest challenges that Russia has faced in recent decades. And as what Putin calls a special military operation, this is what Putin would want to see through his presidency. But first, in December, the Federation Council, the upper house, will have to make a decision on the election date, which is expected to be March 17th. And then the political parties will put forward, will nominate candidates and put them through a pre-election Congress. And these are all formalities. And we are indeed, although these formalities will happen, we are indeed expecting President Putin to run and then win the next election if he does indeed run, because he does have an 80% support in his country at the moment, and he will indeed become one of the longest serving presidents in Russia.
Certainly. Well, thanks a lot for joining us and sharing your views on these pertinent questions that affect the course of not just the war between Russia and Ukraine, but a lot of different issues around the world. Thanks. Russian President Vladimir Putin is scheduled to visit Kazakhstan on the 9th of November, which is just a couple of days away. The two leaders are set to have a bilateral meeting in capital Astana. Putin and Tokayev will also join the Kazakh-Russian business conference that will be held in the city of Kostania. Let's now take a look at some other updates coming in from around the world as well. Pope Francis did not read a prepared speech at a meeting with European rabbis on Monday as he was not feeling well. The 86-year-old pontiff appeared to be short of breath during the start of the meeting. Pope Francis is missing a part of one lung that was removed in his native Argentina. Unseasonably cold weather and blizzards hit northeast China on Monday. Plains, roads and houses were seen covered with snow. Several cities issued heightened weather alerts and warned people to stay indoors. A dense smog covered Pakistan's Lahore, affecting residents' health. According to the meteorological department, Lahore's AQI was close to 400 at various locations on Monday. Former frontman of the K-pop band Big Bang, known as G-Dragon, appeared for police questioning today over the allegations of illegal drug use. G-Dragon is the latest in a series of South Korean artists embroiled in high-profile narcotics cases amid ongoing crackdown on illegal drugs by the government. And still to come up on DD India News Hour, another earthquake of 5.6 magnitude hits Nepal, even as search and rescue operations were on after the 6.4 magnitude earthquake on the 3rd of November. Odd-even scheme for private vehicles and stricter measures are returning to Delhi after Diwali in a bid to improve the Indian capital's severe air quality. And in cricket, Angelo Matthews becomes the first player to be given timed out in the history of international cricket in the World Cup match against Bangladesh, which is ongoing.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India. Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India. Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India. Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India.
Welcome to Lakshadweep, the land of 100,000 islands, the aquatic wonderland of India, an archipelago of spectacular marine gems, colorful coral and crystal clear lagoons, a kaleidoscope of turquoise blue. Each island of Lakshadweep draws in explorers with its unique beauty. Witness idyllic sunsets and pristine beaches of Kavarati, the majestic lighthouse and colorful boat races at Minikoi. Experience water sports in the shallow lagoons of Kadmat. Unwind in the serene setting of Bangaram.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy. Now, another earthquake of 5.6 magnitude hit Nepal on Monday, soon after search and rescue operations concluded following the 6.4 magnitude earthquake on the 3rd of November. The focus has been now on providing essential aid, including food, shelter and medical care to survivors affected by the powerful earthquake in the northwestern province of Karnali. The disaster has caused at least 157 casualties and left over 200 people injured. India sent a plane carrying humanitarian aid to Nepal as the Himalayan nation has been reeling after a deadly earthquake. Meanwhile, the government has decided to provide 200,000 rupees each to those who died due to the earthquake that struck Nepal's Jajarkot and Rukum Paschim districts on Friday night. The government is providing free medical treatment to those injured in the quake. Work for research and rescue for those affected by the earthquake has reached its final stages. Military helicopters have also been deployed to the quake-struck areas to save the seriously injured. Death toll has reached 158. Officials fear the death toll could rise further as first responders have just reached the hilly region, the hilly areas near the epicenter, and begun their search for survivors. Back home, the heads of the border guarding forces of India and Nepal are meeting in New Delhi to discuss crucial issues related to the borders. This is the 7th annual coordination meeting between the Sashastra Seema Bal and Nepal's armed police force, and is scheduled to take place from the 6th of November, which is today, till the 8th. The talks at the level of two heads of the forces serve as a crucial platform for both forces to engage in discussions on border-related matters. The meetings aimed at strengthening the coordination between the two border guarding forces for more effective management of the open and unfenced Indo-Nepal border. The last coordination meeting was held in Kathmandu in September last year. Air quality across cities in India continues to remain in the critical category on Monday. Pollution levels in and around the Indian national capital Delhi have consistently been in the critical category, with air quality index readings in the range of 400 at various locations for the past few days. In view of the increasing pollution, the Delhi government has decided to implement odd-even scheme for private vehicles and many other stricter measures in the capital city. Now, with faculties recruited across the world, the Zanzibar campus of IIT Madras in Tanzania is going to introduce 5 new programs in the next 5 years and will have 50% Indian students and the rest from various African nations. DD India's Ritesh Ranjan has spoken to Director of IIT Madras, Professor Kamakoti Vidinathan. Listen in.
To become Vishwaguru, you have to gain knowledge. And after gaining knowledge, you have to spread the knowledge. Then only you can become Vishwaguru. And IIT Madras is doing the same by opening up a new campus in Zanzibar. Sir, how is this a part of becoming Vishwaguru?
Setting up of a campus is also one of the very important aspects of internationalization. So there was a committee constituted by the Ministry of Education, and then they came out with certain recommendations, and we are looking at those recommendations very seriously. And at that point of time, the implementation of opening up of international campus was given to the respective IITs. So we started off, and one of the important steps that we looked at, important 3 points that we looked at was whether they need an education system. That country where we want to go, will they need an education system as big as India, as big as IIT Madras? What would be the need for it first?
So what all courses you are introducing in that campus, and faculties are from IIT Madras, or you are engaging people from Tanzania also?
So we are opening up 2 courses immediately. The classes have already started in last week of October. We have the BS in Data Science and AI and the MTech in Data Science and AI. We were initially planning about 45 to 50 students. We have filled up all the things. We had just 1.5 months where we went and even created awareness about this campus, what is that course, etc., etc. And IITs and all these brand, everything was done within this short period, and things have worked out very nicely.
The 54th International Film Festival of India will be held from the 20th of this month to the 28th in Goa. India's Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Singh Thakur announced in New Delhi today. Addressing the gathering, the minister said that the film festival gives an important platform to global films while highlighting India's impressive film production record. And now time to get you all the sporting updates as well. And we have my colleague Abhishek for those updates, and lots happening still in the Cricket World Cup, although now we're getting to the stage where we almost know who the Final Four will be for the semi-finals.
Who will be the 4th team? That's interesting. A lot of permutations and combinations. But yes, we'll start with Cricket World Cup. In the first incident to ever take place in international cricket, Sri Lanka batter Angelo Matthews was timed out during Sri Lanka's clash against Bangladesh in Delhi on Monday. Matthews walked in to bat at number 6 at the fall of Sadira Samavikrama's wicket, but had to walk back before facing a single ball after he was timed out. A first in international cricket across all formats. The veteran Sri Lanka all-rounder, who made a late entry to the World Cup as a replacement player, was left befuddled as Bangladesh appealed when it took time to sort an issue with his helmet. The incident happened in the 25th over of the Sri Lanka innings when Shakib Al Hasan had just dismissed Samavikrama, caught by Mahmudullah near the rope. And talking about the match which is underway, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka lock horns in an ICC Cricket World Cup match in New Delhi. Sri Lanka has posted a competitive total of 279 after sparking century by Charit Asalanka. The middle order batsmen scored 108 of 105 deliveries. Asalanka resurrected the Sri Lanka innings after they were reduced to 135 for the loss of 5 wickets. Bangladesh won the toss and elected to bowl. They got early breakthrough when Kushal Perera was dismissed cheaply. Following this, Pathum Nissanka and Kushal Mendes put up 61-run partnership, but Shakib Al Hasan took 2 wickets to trigger middle order collapse as Sri Lanka lost 4 wickets at the halfway point of innings. The two teams don't have much at stake in the World Cup as Bangladesh is already out of the semi-final contention, while Sri Lanka has lost 5 out of the 7 games that they have played. And after a disappointing World Cup campaign, Sri Lanka has sacked its cricket governing body and replaced it with an interim committee. The board came under heavy criticism after Sri Lanka crashed out of semi-final race following their dismal performance. Sri Lanka has won only 2 of their 7 World Cup matches. Third is underway, and Sri Lanka's Ministry of Sport has appointed World Cup winning former captain Arjun Ranatunga as the head of the committee. Ranatunga will be joined by 2 retired Supreme Court judges in the 7-member committee. All right, that's all we have in sports. Back to you, Gautam.
Thanks a lot, Abhishek. And that's all we have for the moment in this edition of DD India News Hour. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news and updates as they break right here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.